Hello and welcome back to Popular Music. This week in Popular Music, we're going to be talking about American pop and the British invasion. This is the 1960s, folks. Let's get started. American pop, the British invasion. So this was a very controversial decade. The 1960s, 1960 and 1970, very, very controversial. Lots of stuff is happening in terms of music and the popularity of music in the United States. And in North America. Rock and roll, developed into simply rock music. Reemergence of country music was huge during the 60s. As people started to kind of prosper again, so did music. And again, folks, you can take a look on Google Classroom for our slides for this presentation if you wish to read it at your own pace. Now again, folks, I'm not going to read every single thing here, but you're more than welcome to go through this on your own. I'm just going to hit on the key points. So we're talking about dance music in the 1960s, the early 60s. We call these the teenage symphonies because they were popular with a lot of teenagers and younger people at this time. We get the dance move of the twist, which was coveted by Chubby Checker, whose name is Ernest Evans. And they recorded this song in 1960. The dance itself, is very individual. You don't have to touch anybody to dance, and there's not a lot of there's no real movement in your feet. It's all in the hips. And this form, the twist, was really popular when dancing to rock music. Now we go into Phil Spector. He achieved success as a recording artist as a teenager, which was unknown at this time. He established himself by the early 1960s as a songwriter and producer, working behind the scenes of rock and roll. He created many independent labels. His main one was the Phillies, called Phillies Records. When he was only 21 years old, he founded this. He had a very characteristic sound as an indie label, which gives the listener and the artists who are recording with him dense and clear sounds, and this became the idea as the wall of sound. Spector preferred vocal groups over individual artists. And a couple of songs that you should listen to by Phil Spector are Be My Baby. This was recorded and released in 1963. It was performed by the Ronettes. What makes it unique is that it had a full orchestra section that was playing along with the singers. Another song that was produced by Phil Spector is called Uptown, released in 1962 and is performed by the Crystals, a very big name band in the early 1960s. Then we move into Gordy and Motown. Motown Records is huge. And we call it Motown because it is directly produced in the Motor City, otherwise known as Detroit. Big car manufacturing city, Motor City, Motown. And this was created, Motown Records was created by Berry Gordy Jr., who was born in 1929. And Motown reached its commercial peak as a label when Phil Spector's Phillies Records folded and stopped recording and producing in 1966. Motown, one of the first groups that Motown worked with, were the Supremes and Temptations, better known to a wider public than the Crystals or the Ronettes that were signed with Phil. Now, Motown Records and Berry Gordy, he chose recording artists who were charismatic, they were sophisticated live performers, and they knew the music well. In 1971, though, Motown moved its headquarters to kind of the more friendly to musicians and kind of the hub of music producing and recording at the time, which was Los Angeles. So they moved in 1971. Still kept the name Motown because it was catchy and everybody knew them as Motown. take a listen to My Girl. Okay, it was composed and produced by Smokey Robinson and Ronald White. Performed by the Temptations group, who you see here, Supremes and Temptations. Okay, My Girl, released in 1965. Have a listen to that. As well, if you would like, take a listen to You Can't Hurry Love, composed by Holland Dozier Holland, and it was produced by them as well, and performed by the Supremes, okay, in 1966. Then we get into Brian Wilson. Very famous, kind of popular music star in the early 1960s. Okay, Brian Wilson performed with a group called the Beach Boys. He actually brought them together. And there's a very famous song by, I think it's Bare Naked Ladies, where they mention Brian Wilson's name. Just like Brian Wilson did, lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did. Unfortunately, because Brian Wilson was found dead in bed, in his bed. But he formed the Beach Boys in 1961 with his friend, with his two brothers, a cousin and a friend in Hawthorne, California. Okay, they were all really close, and they created some of the North America's and the world's, I think, some of the most famous early rock and roll songs of the 1960s. Very, very popular, very trend-setting in the 1960s, very popular with the young people of the time. And they first established the model with outstanding success. This model of, okay, we're a band that we form together, we know each other, but we perform in this style of rock and roll together, not individual like Elvis Presley, but together as the Beach Boys, and Brian Wilson as that kind of leading voice, the leading figure of that band. Now the Beach Boys, now they're in their name, it implies something to do with the beach, right? And because they're from Hawthorne, California, in the early 60s, we get this idea of surf music. Okay, this style, this California style of surf music erupted in the early 1960s, especially with the combination of the Beach Boys and Dick Dale with his band, the Deltones. Right, you got this interesting surf guitar sound. With the new technology of amplifiers, you can get this cool surf sound from the reverb coming from the amps. It's really cool. Then we come to the Beatles. Now, you have to remember, early rock and roll in the early 1960s was really popular in North America, both in Canada and the United States. But early rock and roll never really took quite a hold from the American musicians performing and producing music. It never really took hold in Britain until the Beatles came around. Now, the Beatles were known throughout Europe and established stars in the UK by the time their first number one record hit in the United States in 1964. I Want to Hold Your Hand. Everybody knows that song. I want to hold your hand. Everybody knows that one. This Beatlemania erupted. First in Europe, then in North America, specifically in the United States. Everybody loved them. And these American producers, American artists, kind of took a punch to the face when the Beatles landed. They didn't quite know how to respond, how to react to the style of the Beatles, and people loved them. The Beatles as a group continued to evolve in new and unexpected directions. They modeled their band, first starting out with Buddy Holly's group, the Crickets. Then in 1962, John Lennon and George Harrison, and Ringo Starr came together. as kind of the main form of the Beatles. And in 1963, they released the album Please Please Me, which was released only in Britain. 6 covers, 8 originals. We get Lennon and McCartney, who were the chief songwriters, and then Harrison kind of started to really contribute to this. Now, Ringo Starr, sure, he occasionally stepped in, but not huge, right? Remember, he's a drummer, so it's okay. They contrasted the Beach Boys with one member being the creative center of the group. Remember, Beach Boys, you had one member as the creative center. Okay? Brian Wilson. But with the Beach Boys, they were all very, very involved in the creative process of the music. So you have to think of it that way, as the evolution of the rock and roll band, or the rock band, right? How you don't have that one lead person, and now everybody contributes somewhat equally to that creative process, to the songwriting and music creation. 4 songs by the Beatles that I highly recommend you take a listen to is Please Please Me, one of their first, it's the first album that came out in 1962. A Hard Day's Night in 1964. Yesterday. Dooba 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 da. Ya da 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 dee da dee da da. That's 1965. And then Eleanor Rigby. Please take a listen to that as well. That came out in 1966. These 4 songs are major in the libraries of major Beatles fans and very controversial and influential into making it big in North America, especially for the Beatles. Now we get some other bands that are coming in to North America at the same time. The Rolling Stones, obviously, huge band. We get the Animals, the Who, the Kinks, and Eric Clapton. Now, these artists remain closer to their roots in American rhythm and blues music and rock and roll than the Beatles did, but they all became huge sensations in North America. The Rolling Stones called themselves the world's greatest rock and roll band. That can be argued and debated, but many people, even to this day, 50, 60 years later, still believe that. They were the bad boys of music, right? Which we associate at times with rock and roll, this idea of the bad boy or the bad girl, right? They came out with their number 1 single in 1965, I Can Get No Satisfaction. Right? Very, very influential. Brian Wilson, okay, he's came around, he said, you know what? Screw the Beatles. Let's create some more music together. Okay, and this was in California. The Beatles landed not quite in California, but on the other coast, New York. And Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys said, okay, we're losing popularity here. Our songs are not quite number 1 anymore. What can we do to combat this invasion of British artists? And so they came out with an album called Rubber Soul. And this new technique of music called the pet sounds, right? Just the symphonic cycle of songs that charts a progression from youthful optimism all the way through to enlightenedhood or emotional disillusionment as a kind of a new adult in the world. The concept album was huge, and Brian Wilson helped to bring this forward. A concept album, by the way, is an album that is conceived as an integrated whole. So you have one idea, this one concept, and all the songs that go in that concept or that album all relate to one another over a central theme. We get Good Vibrations, right? Very famous song, right? Do Good Vibrations. From Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys in 1966. Or good vibrations. Take a listen to the song. It's awesome. Virtually every aspect is unusual in this song. From the vocal arrangement to the instrumentation to the different chords that are found. Okay, you get some weird instrumentation in this rock and roll music like organ, flutes, cello. You don't see that. The theremin, which, if you remember, we looked at the theremin and at the National Music Center, the Studio Bell, they have a working theremin. You don't even have to touch it to create sounds. Recording is a composite of several tapes made at various times. That's what this recording is a whole bunch of different music coming together and then slapped together, hopefully getting something good. And you get this good vibration song, which I guess the title kind of says it all. Take a listen. Highly recommend it. If you've never heard it before, please Google it, YouTube it, do what you must. You've got to get this in your ear. We also get some Latin sounds coming out of the 1960s. Okay, a tall man, a tan girl, and a taste of honey. We get boogaloo or Latin soul music coming out. This fusion, okay, of Latin sounds from rumba and mambo with African American popular music. Ramon Santamaria, okay, also called Mongo. He came out with this really cool hit called Watermelon Man. If you have never heard this song, please take a listen. I almost can guarantee that some of you have heard this song before, just didn't know who it was by. Okay, and he's a very famous conga drum player, very, very good percussionist. We also get Ray Barretto. Okay, Puerto Rican music, El Watusi, is based on the Charanga style of music and dance from Latin America. And he is also a very, very good percussionist. Okay, from New York originally, but his folks are from Puerto Rico. And he really brought this idea of Latin music in terms of rock and roll style Latin music and popular music into North America, especially into the United States. His success came later on as a result of this new dance craze called the Watusi. Okay, and his music, if you listen to it, it's very rhythmic and it can be easy to dance to depending on the type of song you're listening to. So have a listen to the song. It's called El Watusi. Take a listen, see for yourself, or listen for yourself. The bossa nova also became a huge trend in North America at this time. Okay, bossa nova simply means new trend from the Portuguese language. Okay, it's very sophisticated in terms of the musicality as well as the dance itself. And one of the big names here is Stan Getz and Charlie Bird. They're both jazz musicians from California, but they became so entwined with the style of bossa nova. They loved the bossa nova style of music, the rhythms found in it, the tempo, and they actually recorded a song called The Girl from Ipanema. Very famous song. Boo-dum ba-doo-da, boo-boo-da, bum ba-da boo-doo-da, boo-dum ba-doo-dum, bum bum boo-dum. Bum bum boom bum. Anyways, please have a listen to that song. It's from 1964. The original from Stan Getz and Bird is really good. But there's lots of different iterations of The Girl from Ipanema that many artists have re-recorded or reimagined, including Santana, very, very good guitar player. So please have a listen to that song, The Girl from Ipanema. We get Herb Albert as well. Lots of Mexican influences here from Tijuana. Let's keep moving. And now we're at the end. We've got some key terms. So take a look at Bossa Nova, the concept album, and Latin soul. Those are the three that I think are really important in terms of the 1960s and this British invasion and the true start, I think, of rock and roll music. Sure, we get the 50s, really, we get these interesting sounds coming out, but I think this is a big point as well. Okay, so Bossa Nova, concept album, and Latin soul. And here are some very key people to this time period, to the 1960s, to that decade of early rock and roll music and the British invasion. Number one being Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. Okay, the Beatles, huge. Who do we have here? Dick Clark, okay, kind of key to this time period. Phil Spector. Now, he's important for the early recordings, right, of those kind of groups, especially the Temptations. Okay, the Ronettes, sure, okay, but Temptations are big. Please take a listen to them. Ramon, okay, Mongo Santa Maria, very good player, percussionist. As Stan Getz and the Supremes. Those are the ones I think you should really take a look at. So we got Beach Boys, the Beatles, Brian Wilson, who's the lead of the Beach Boys. We've got Dick Clark, Phil Spector, Ramon Santa Maria, Stan Getz, okay, is really big in terms of jazz music and really pushing forward that sound. And then the Supremes, that kind of first group who recorded with Motown. And Motown. Take a look at Motown. They still exist today. Okay, huge label. That's everything for today, folks. As always, you can find this presentation on our Google Classroom. Take a listen, take a look up the songs. I highly recommend this time period. Lots of good stuff coming out. And just remember that even though the British artists, sure, they call it an invasion, North American music, North American popular music was still popular. It just wasn't number one all the time on the charts. And they didn't like that a lot, but that's for another day. Okay, we can have some wonderful discussions in our Google Classroom. Remember, answer this week's discussion question of the week based on this presentation. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to email me anytime. Bye for now. Talk to you later.